pledge.
He tried to put it on his phone. Cancel enough from under.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The roll call, please.
Mr. Anise?
Present?
Mr. Bova? Mr. Brodsky? Mr. Coyne?
Yes.
Mr. D'Elia?
Here.
Mr. Ford?
Here.
Mr. Haskell?
Yes.
Mr. Karam?
Here.
Mr. Mutolo? And Ms. Sesney? Here. Thank you.
We have our draft minutes from the August 28, 2023 meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
I do.
A second?
Second?
Thank you. Any additions, corrections, deletions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Committee reports. The finance report, Jim?
Yes, in your booklets, I believe, is the monthly report. We didn't mail it out. We're still working on some things. Consumption has made a small recovery. We're still down 7% for the year. We're at 7.4, I believe, in July. So we're down just like a little above 7%. Water sales continues to, between budget and actual, increase. So we're about $800,000 below budget. A lot of that has to do with our big customers, as we mentioned last meeting. But cash flow is doing pretty good. We're actually increasing, and we need that going into the later part of the year to pay some larger bills, retirement, and things like that. So, we're, and you'll see in the budget when we do our presentation, even though we're down in our water sales, it seems like we're maintaining our cash flow pretty well. So we've made some reductions in some of the expenses throughout the month, so that's helped out. Any questions?
It says your operating expenses are favorable by 3.1 million.
Accrued, yes. A lot of that has to do with the reductions that we made during the year. We still have to pay some things out, but yeah, we are doing pretty well there. So,
Anything else, Rich?
No, thank you.
Anybody? Thanks, Jim. Discussion regarding legal notice, and I think it's a miscellaneous in our packet. Are you doing this, Pat?
Yeah, very, very quickly. So we are required under our enabling legislation that created us to have a officially designated newspaper of notice where we place our legal notices of board meetings, announcements, all those things. Since the organization's inception, it's been the Utica Observer Dispatch. As you know, they've been thinning staff. They're published out of town now. They don't really even have any local reporters. They never have a presence here. And in the meantime, the Rome Daily Sentinel's been having a growing presence. They actually have a staff that reports on local issues here. They have a new office now on the east side. And I asked Amy to check the pricing on their legal notices, and it was roughly half, as I recall, Amy?
Oh. It's about maybe $13-14 cheaper.
Yeah, per notice. So my thought, and I've had some discussion with the chairman about this in the past, about maybe redesignating our official newspaper of notice to be the Daily Sentinel rather than the Observer Dispatch, since they cover a lot more local stuff, and it would save us money at the same time. But they certainly have much more of a local presence here, and the Observer Dispatch has been slowly leaving town.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, about time, you know.
I wasn't going to say that part, but so just food for thought. It was just a suggestion. If the board can act on that now or whenever you might feel like it. But I want to let you know that we would save money doing that.
Anyone care to move it? Thank you, Rich. Thanks, Betty. Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Pat?
There's always a lot going on, but there's just one issue I thought I would cover as quickly as I could and move on until we get into budget workshop later. You have heard that we are required to give to the State Health Department approximately a year from now, a year from the end of October, something called a lead service line inventory, which is going to be our best investigative guess as to how many lead service lines are left in the system, where they are. We've been kind of narrowing it down a little bit. Our IT department did a data mining search. We also found some information from when the Utica Water Board was first created in 1938. They did, in fact, have in their rules and regulations that lead services were prohibited after that date. We're choosing, we ran it two ways, 1945 and 1950, scouring construction dates of homes, so that anything after those dates we could rule out safely, which we think the health department would accept as a reasonable assumption as long as we had the documentation. The only reason why we're not going all the way back to 1938 is we knew there was a copper shortage in World War II. So there may have been some lead service pipe left in inventory that could have been used, even though it wasn't supposed to be. So we're doing that. In the meantime, Dan Falzinski worked with our maintenance crew, our maintenance folks rather. This vacuum excavation truck that we bought, they did go out and run some tests on actually vacuuming very narrow 36-inch holes over some curb boxes to be able to see both halves, our side going to the main, that side going to the house, and verify visually, which is part of what we're going to be expected to do, to confirm if it's lead or copper or something else. And so we figured out we could do 5, perhaps 6 a day with that truck. It lowers the restoration cost quite a bit. We picked ones where the curb box is comfortably between the sidewalk and the curb or the street, so that we're not pulling up flags of sidewalk and, replacing curbing and everything else. The goal is to do what we're going to hope is going to be an acceptable level of sampling that we can extrapolate from, especially on certain blocks. If we can verify a few, we'll know that our records are probably pretty good for the rest. In the meantime, tomorrow I'll be heading out to Buffalo for the New York State section of the AWWA, American Water Works Association, is having their fall meeting in Buffalo. And there was going to be a presentation on Wednesday morning on using electrical current to determine, based on conductivity, if it's lead or if it's copper. Based on some of the literature that I looked at ahead of time, the diagrams aren't real clear on how they connect up and do that. So our intention, Phil Tankor is already down there, but we're going to be sitting in that presentation, obviously, and then talking to the vendor later. And if it's something that they could do as a service, we might want to look into that and price it, particularly since we asked for $2 million through the Environmental Facilities Corporation to help offset costs to develop the lead service line investigation. So that's where I'll be until Thursday afternoon, and then back in on Friday. But with a little luck, we might find a good resource to be able to speed this process up and not have to drill as many holes as we're looking at doing right now. And then we have to, again, by mid-October of next year, hand in what is going to be our best guess, and hope the health department will accept it. But right now they're playing coy. They won't really tell us what criteria is acceptable and what's not. Do your best, and then we'll tell you. So we'll find out in a year from now if they're going to kick it back to us to say, okay, that looks pretty good. In the meantime, we'll probably know by the end of this October as to whether or not the EPA is going to make us start tearing lead pipes out of the ground, irrespective of whether we can achieve desired levels through further, treatment of the water by buffering it. So we're doing the analysis on the buffering. We may also have to start tearing pipes out of the ground, a certain percentage, every year over the next 10 or 15 years. Who knows what it might be. So we're waiting to find that out too. And that topic is something that will kind of leads into old business. But unless there's any questions, I'll stop there.
That's it?
That's it.
All right, good report.
As I said, there's always a lot going on, but I don't want to tell you everything. We'll be here all night.
Under old business.
Under old
Go
business.
right to the pipes.
Speaking of lead service pipes and fire sirens, they're late today. They're usually here by mid-morning. Unless they were here earlier and I missed it. So as I mentioned, the EPA is very likely going to mandate that we start tearing lead pipes out of the ground, regardless of the chemical testing that we're doing now to see if we can achieve lower levels through treating the water. In that spirit, we may have mentioned at one point that the city of Utica actually received money from the state of New York for a lead service line replacement program. They gave it to the city instead of us because the city as a municipality met income tests that were below a certain threshold where we would have been disqualified once you add in the rest of the service territory. So the city was the lead agency on this program. They received $600 and something thousand, and they decided to do it in conjunction with their street reconstruction program. So over the last few years, as they targeted roads to be, revamped, there were areas there where if we could indicate where we thought we had some lead service pipes, they were using that money to change those out at the same time. That way the restoration would be done as part of the street reconstruction program. And in theory, you could change out more services if you're not wasting some of that money, restoring patches and stuff in the street. Bless you. So that money's gone, but they did a few extras that they came across while they were finishing up the street. They came to us and we're looking for reimbursement. We discussed it with the capital committee last week and decided that it was probably pretty reasonable because given that the EPA is likely to tell us to start tearing pipes out anyway, there's a couple of extra services they did above and beyond the normal program. And it's quite likely that we would have had to change those at some point anyway and at some future cost where the restoration because of the street work may not have even been covered by that. So we recommended to the capital committee that it was a fairly reasonable request. Between Jim and Dan and I, we've concluded that there's money in prior allocations for our cash capital improvement program, our infrastructure maintenance fund that we designate, that is fairly flexible for general water system improvements, main replacements, all those kinds of things. Jim has found adequate funds in there to pay for it. We then discussed this with Ken. Ken drafted a resolution that I think, is that in front of everybody right now? I can't recall. Is that resolution in the books, Amy? Okay. And then I know that Ken had asked Dan for comments. Dan recommended a couple changes. And so I don't know between Ken or Dan if you want to kind of walk through what it says for board consideration and with any of the changes maybe that Dan has suggested.
Well, I mean, Dan, you know more about it, but basically the city has contracted with, was it Schmaltz Mechanical Contractors?
Correct.
And they performed work, and there were some of the properties were more our responsibility than the city's responsibility.
Two properties in particular did not qualify for grant reimbursement because in order to qualify for the grant reimbursement, both the public and private side services had to be replaced. You had two residents that would not allow the city to go in and replace their private line, so those dollars couldn't be covered by the grant. So that's $12,400 in a charge that we would be paying Smalls for. And then the city exceeded the budget of about $360,000 by $62,000, approximately, $62,800. And we had reached an agreement with the city to cover half of that cost, which is $31,568, which included about 10 other services that the budget wouldn't account for.
Right, and the money's going to be paid directly to the contractor.
Correct.
Which I think is better, for our purposes. It's not reimbursement or payment to the city. It's payment to the contractors for the work which was performed to the benefit of the authority.
And was competitively bid by the city.
And has apparently met Dan's criteria in terms of cost and scope.
Correct. It's coming out of our repair and improvement fund.
So that's where we sit, and we'll take any questions if anybody wants more information or has an
Well, I'm
objection.
just a curiosity question.
Sure.
Why did they ever go to lead in the first place?
Many years ago?
Yeah.
I think partly because of cost. 2, it didn't rust. 3, it was fairly malleable, so you could use it in flexible ways if you needed to elbow it around rocks through foundations and things of that nature.
Oh.
Lead was in use for water purveyance since the Roman times.
Yeah.
Just
I
because
just
it was a
wondered
soft metal, it was easier to work with,
Yeah.
and it didn't rust. So yeah, unfortunately, they didn't know until more recently what the hazard was.
Any other questions? Someone care to move the motion as presented?
I'll move it.
Thank you, Carl. Rich, thanks. Any further discussion, comments, concerns? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Any new business? We need to a motion to go into executive session to deal with a personnel matter. Thank you, Betty. Second. Rich? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you.